today we've pulled together a few young environmentalists who work with Audubon to ask them about Earth Day, both now and in the future. So it's really exciting for me to introduce two people that I enjoy working with very much, Roslyn Rivas and Dominic, and they are going to join Christine here for some Q&A about what Earth Day means to each of you as young environmentalists and Audubon staff members. Thanks all for being with us.
Thanks for having us here.
So, yes, you're welcome. So let me start with the question we're asking everyone today, which is what Earth Day means to you. And just to keep things neat and tidy, let's go Dominic, Christine, and Roslyn. What does Earth Day mean to you? Dominic, up first.
All right, thanks, David, for the question. I think my answer is going to be grounded in what Dr. Hayhoe said. And, you know, the answer is we start with the who we already are. So who am I? I'm a storyteller for Audubon, someone that's, you know, emboldened to go vote locally and nationally. I'm an Asian American, a novice birder. And when you examine all of the roles and identities that, you know, I am, you know, I'm asking myself, how are my actions in service of the, to the planet? Am I being a good consumer and looking at, you know, the sustainability stories behind what's being made and stuff like that. So I think that is what comes to mind for me when I think about what Earth Day means to me.
Yeah, so what Earth Day means to me is kind of jumping off of what Brooke mentioned earlier, because my first memory of Earth Day was actually in elementary school. And it was basically the thing that got me to think actively about the environment, because I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I remember every year it would be a huge event in my school in Dallas, Texas, where we would have Earth Day parades, and we would plant wildflowers outside and watch birds. And we even invited Trinity River Audubon Center to come at one point. So Earth Day, to me, it was basically the catalyst to get me to become an environmentalist.
Yeah. So I think of Earth Day as something that's just very unifying, like globally unifying. Living on this planet is something we all share in common, and that's something we can all celebrate. And it just reminds me of, like many of us, and like Christine was saying and Brooke, just how much I love being in nature. Like I'm a city girl. I grew up in New York City, born and raised in the Bronx here. But I always loved hiking and being outdoors and living right next to the Bronx Zoo and the Botanical Garden. So that's always been a big part of my life. But you know, this day also brings like its fair share of frustrations when we remember the realities of the world, like how we're losing so much habitat, natural habitat, and how minority, indigenous, and poor communities especially are disproportionately impacted by climate change. So Earth Day really makes me appreciate my home, our home, and kind of like reignites my drive to fight for environmental issues and climate justice.
That's all really beautifully said. And Roslyn, I think holding that duality in our minds and hearts on a day like today, where we think about how much hope and joy we have and also the concerns that we have, is part of what a day like this means. And Christine, I love the story that Earth Day is actually what got you into where you are now, all the way back in elementary school. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I know that you are all now in your 20s, you're in your first jobs, and some of you have referenced thinking about Earth Day even as children. So I'm wondering if you have an answer, and maybe we'll put this one to Roslyn first and then Dominic. How have you seen Earth Day change during your lifetime?
Yeah, so I mean, this may just be a product of us getting older and then noticing the importance of things more as we get older, but I definitely feel as though acknowledging Earth Day has just gotten more and more significant with every passing year. As Dr. Hayhoe was saying earlier, not everyone takes climate change as seriously as we would like, but it feels as though climate change is reaching a point in our like collective consciousness that we just can't ignore anymore. So we all have to face this and change the way we run things if we can actually secure our future. And it's an issue many more young people are fighting for, and will continue to advocate for. And in terms of how I've celebrated Earth Day, I always loved getting involved in tree plantings and park cleanups when I was younger, and I still do now. And now as an adult, I definitely have more of a grasp on the environmental movement and what I can do and what I support, how I vote, you know.
Thanks, Roslyn.
Great, thank you.
For me, and in my lifetime, I know I've noticed, you know, a growing understanding of ramifications of our actions. So to bring an anecdote similar to Christine, you know, after my 3rd grade field trip on Earth Day, my mom started to do little actions around the house of, you know, composting, leaving the light on as much as possible, or leaving it off as much as possible. And I think throughout my lifetime, I've seen people taking it upon themselves to do good for this planet. And I was reminded that today, while I was live streaming, while working Twitch, and seeing how across the world, people that are artists, people that are journalists like myself, and people that work nationally and locally to affect change on a political level have, you know, responded to the needs of the earth. So there's definitely been a growing passion, and I was just, you know, today reminded again that passion is not just something that's happening locally or on this show, but it's happening in multiple places across the world.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so that's looking back. Now let's look forward. So this is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. What do you think in another 50 years, the 100th anniversary of Earth Day might look like? Or at least what do you hope it would look like? Dominic, let's stay with you and then go to the other two as well.
First and foremost, I definitely feel, or I would want, you know, the Earth to not be beyond repairable, or not beyond repairable. And I've had the, you know, opportunity to be on the ground during lobby days where I've got to document some climate advocates and their work to place clean energy laws in Washington, to conserve water in Arizona. So I guess my hope 50 years down the line is to, you know, see the impact of what we've done locally and on a state level. And hopefully, you know, we continue on that progress of, you know, having 100% clean energy standard in Washington, and having that spread out in multiple states and multiple regions of the country. So whether that be, you know, chapters advocating, or college students advocating, I'd love to see during the 100th anniversary that, you know, we can go arm in arm and show how impassioned we are for the environment.
Yeah, and like Dominic, my hope is also that our planet obviously will not be irreparable. So it really depends a lot on what we do as a collective human species right now in the next 50 years. So I feel like it could go two polarizing ways, and my hope is that we'll be celebrating all that we've accomplished in the past 50 years in 2070.
Yeah, I totally agree with Dominic and Christine. I mean, hopefully by then we'll continue on this trajectory of the general public taking climate change seriously. But I have faith in our generation and those younger than us. This is an issue we care so strongly about, and we'll continue fighting for it until we actually see real change. And I definitely can see like larger marches, like on a global scale all over the world. And also more storytelling, because it seems personal stories are how you can really reach people with when it comes to this topic, especially on how climate change is affecting us personally, and it can be more effective in changing someone's mind or point of view.
That's such a good point, Roslyn, and it echoes some of what we heard from Dr. Hayhoe, right? That it's not about putting a bunch of data in front of people, but it's about connecting over those things that you have in common, telling stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I know that a lot of our audience is saying in the comments that if you are the future, then the future looks bright. So I wanna ask you one more question, and as I'm asking this to our panelists, I also want those who are watching us to think about your answer and post it in the comments, because after our panelists answer, we'll read some of your comments as well. So the question is to each of you, what gives you hope? And Christine, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I'll go back to when I was a younger child. So ever since Earth Day, I started caring about the environment in my version of being an activist, was starting an environmental club in middle school, or I would go to my local malls and post up these posters calling for action. But now, like in today's age, I'm seeing like this on such a bigger scale with people like, I mean, Greta Thunberg's the most well-known probably, but there's also other young climate activists like Isra Hirsi and Helena Gwalinga and so many others. And the scale of the movement is something I could never have imagined when I was a little middle schooler. So that kind of solidarity is what gives me hope.
Yeah, I agree with that. Dominic, how about you?
So I guess I want to bring up what I saw on Twitch today. One of a younger artist performed a song called Honor Earth, and they said, "I will be there when the work is done, and what I leave for my grandchildren." So I guess my hope is in the people that I've talked to in the Audubon network and in on college campuses across the country, in those discussions already being had, and in 50 years from now when we celebrate for the 100th year anniversary of Earth Day, I know that even the people after us, since Roslyn, myself, and Christine work at Audubon, but our college chapter people, I've gotten a chance to see the work that they've done, gone birding with them, and they've been they're well informed about the environment, and I've seen them in action, planting native plants and talking to them about how even in a time when we're all isolated from each other, they're continuing to prepare for the future and putting in those seeds for a world where we can celebrate together again. So yeah, that's where my hope lies.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Yeah, and like many of you, like I've also been lucky to, since I was little, like get an exposure to like conservation. Like I would go to the Bronx Zoo like every other weekend. That's where my love of nature grew. And it gives me hope that we can have a lot of like child and education surrounding wildlife conservation for the future generations. And yeah, like Christine was saying, like there's just like such a great energy of like the youth today, like going to the climate strike or just different marches. You can feel that this is something that is so dear to our hearts, and we're not going to stop like fighting for it and trying to make a change in this world. So yeah, I definitely, like, my hope definitely lies in the work that we as a youth group are doing. Yeah.
Yes, and Dominic, you mentioned the Audubon on Campus College Chapters program, and in less than a year and a half, that has exploded to almost 120 college and university campuses all over the country. It's just fantastic getting to know a lot of those students, some of whom are probably watching us tonight. Hello. So as I promised, we want to hear from our audience. So please keep the answers to the question, what gives you hope, coming. To our panelists, we're going to put this in a time capsule so you can watch it on the 100th anniversary of Earth Day and see where we are. But Christine, why don't we hear from some of our viewers?
Yep. So I'll share my screen here. Let me see, share. So Cass shared with us earlier on Twitter that, let me pull it up. So Cass says, "New life, thriving in the midst of suffering, that's my hope." So I think that's a really great way to find inspiration in this situation, and it's a great way to appreciate birds. And let's see, let me stop sharing. And then let's see, Kauai says, "A pair of house finches made a nest and raised 4 little baby birds, and they just fledged, all caps, today, exclamation point. My husband and I got to watch them grow up right from our big front window." That's awesome.
That's terrific. We've got one from Shira, who has a simple but beautiful answer. "Birds give me hope." Thank you, Shira. I agree. And then one from Judy too. Judy says, "As someone in my 70s, what gives me hope is hearing from your amazing panelists. They're so impassioned. They make the future seem so bright." Hear, hear. Thank you all for that. Well, thank you, Roslyn and Dominic, so much for joining us. We're almost at the end of our show tonight, but we really appreciate you bringing hope to Judy and to so many of us from what you shared tonight, the work that you do every day. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.